Hey, busy business people. I am here today with another entrepreneur taking action, Jeremy Streten. Hopefully, I said that right. Jeremy helps business owners make sense of their legal stuff that they need to get right in their business so they can avoid trouble. And I'm getting the scoop today on how he does it. So stay tuned. All right. Hey, Jeremy, why do you think business owners avoid getting legal advice for their business? Why are they putting that off?
Christina, it's a great question, and I think that there's really three main reasons. The first reason is that people don't like dealing with lawyers. I'm a lawyer. I've been a lawyer for nearly 20 years at the time of recording this. And what I've seen time and time again is that people don't want to deal with a lawyer because some lawyers, present company excluded, think that, or at least act like they're better than other people. And so they have that. There's a bit of a problem that occurs in the industry where they're kind of acting out and they're trying to pretend that they're better than people. And I think a lot of lawyers would probably take that as a badge of honor. I don't, but I think it's a one reason why there's such a divide between lawyers and their clients. The second reason is that a lot of lawyers charge on time. If you're charging on time, you charge on generally it's a 6 minute increment of time. So if you do work for 5 minutes and 30 seconds or a minute, then you charge 1 unit of time, whatever that works out to be. If you do 6 minutes and 10 seconds, you charge 2 units of time. So it's like double the fee. And I think that creates a divide between lawyers and their clients where the client's trying to get out of the conversation or trying to get quicker advice or start questioning how much time spent on it because they're doing this they're being charged based on the time that they're spending on it. And the third thing is that there's a lot of legal terms out there that sound confusing. Like law is all based on Latin, and Latin has all these big confusing terms. And a lot of people just get turned off by the language of law. And it doesn't have to be that way. Lawyers can speak in plain English. We can explain things in a simple to understand way. And so they're my three big reasons to answer that question, Christine. I don't know. Hope I've answered your question there, but I think it's a really important thing for people to understand that not all lawyers are like that, and there is a better way of doing it.
Well, and I think one of the other issues, I know this me personally, before I ended up with just like one of those legal shield things on retainer, it's you don't even know if you need to ask the lawyer a question. So it's really hard to just be like, hey, I've got to explain what's going on. So I need your time so that I know if I need to actually book a paid consult with you. Like that one is a really tricky one too. How would somebody go about figuring out, like, do I even need to talk to a lawyer? What are some like red flags that would be like, yeah, it's worth me giving you, money for your time?
It's such an important question, and it's one that I think comes back to really one word, and that's education. You need to educate yourself about what the legal risks are in your business. As a lawyer, I know the normal legal risks that someone's going to have in their business, and I know, and you will know the business situations that you have. But coming together, it can be a very difficult thing because of what you've talked about there, because people don't know what they're talking about. So, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, if you can educate yourself about what are the normal problems that arise in law, and then you go to the lawyer to help you solve it. I think sometimes there's a divide there where people they think that they can educate themselves and then they get to make the decision about whether or not they need to do something or not. And that might work, 7 out of 10 times, or I'm just pulling that number out, but it may work. It won't work a certain number of times. But what I would say is that for anything that you're not sure about, once you've got that education about what a legal aspect of your business is, what a legal risk is in your business, you can understand generally why you should do that or you shouldn't do that, and then go and get the advice from the lawyer or the attorney. They're the same thing. We generally call them lawyers over here in Australia, and you guys call them attorneys in America. And get the advice about what you need to do, and then you go forward with that confidence. So it's really that education, Christina, that I think is so super important and something that a lot of people miss, but it's so easy to do.
That brought up like two really good questions. I have to figure out which one to ask first. So one of them, one thing you said earlier was, a lot of legal stuff happens in Latin. and you can speak in plain English. So I know one thing I've heard people kind of tossed around is when you have basic contracts and stuff that you send with a client when you're
Mm.
starting an engagement or whatever, and those things are a pain. They're terrible to read, they're awful. And so there's been this kind of trend of creating plain English contracts, and I've heard pushback that, oh, well, those aren't legal because they're not written in legalese. Like, what do you have to say about that with like plain English agreements and contracts with clients?
Yeah, I think that anyone who says that they're not legally enforceable, I'm not going to be rude. I think it's hogwash. I think it's complete hogwash. Yeah, I've read and I've studied the law all around the world. From Australia where I'm based to the US to the UK to South Africa, yeah, India. I've studied it all, and plain English definitely works. And saying that it doesn't really means you haven't tried hard enough. Like honestly, it means you haven't tried hard enough to explain something in plain English, because it does work, and you don't need all those complicated words that are in the agreements. But I'll go with hogwash. I think the hogwash is but I think people could probably get my sentiment on that. It's yeah, it's nonsense.
Yep. I know I've had clients that really do appreciate it whenever I show them, because like I went through great pains to understand the contracts that I got from my lawyers and translate them into something that was easy to understand. And I went through and rewrote them all, because it was like every time a lawyer touches it, it just gets harder and harder to understand. And so it's like I worked hard on rewriting them in plain English. And my clients appreciate
Yep,
that
and
most of
you
the time. They're like, I understand what this is and what I'm signing, and thank you. And trying like to inject a little bit of humor in there and stuff like that, because like they need to understand what it is.
mm. And I think that's one of the parts of law that lawyers do themselves a great disservice by not doing that. And at the end of the day, I'm glad that you said that you did that, Christina, because a lot of people don't. They just get the agreement from their lawyer, and that's what they use, even if they don't understand it. But at the end of the day, you own your business. You're accountable for what happens in your business, and you're responsible for it. They're all the above the line behaviors, and you need to make sure that you understand it. You need to make sure that you're comfortable with it. You need to make sure that you are willing to go and sell on it. Otherwise, it just won't work. So yeah, you've got to take action. Yeah, I love the name of your podcast, Entrepreneurs Taking Action, because you've got to take action, because the buck stops with you, and there's no excuse of, oh, my lawyer told me to do it, or my lawyer wrote this, or whatever flies, because you're the owner of the business.
Well, and I started learning to ask like what sections of this are unenforceable. Like, what have you included just because we're assuming they won't know that I can't enforce it? Because, like, that's just making, to me, that's making it unnecessarily complex. Like, if I have to present my client
100%.
a 10-page legal document that they can't understand, and five of those pages I cannot even enforce. And I end up with like a contract that takes me 2 weeks longer to get signed because they have to send it to their lawyer, and their lawyer has to review it. And then their lawyer says, well, these are unenforceable. We would like them removed. And like, it just causes friction that's unnecessary. Like, what do you think about those
Mm.
sections of the stuff being in there if you can't even enforce it anyway?
Take it out, unless it's designed to, like, as kind of guardrails on the operation of the business. So I think that, one of the things that people get wrong so much in agreements is that they don't define, like, the rules. I like to look at an agreement as really a disagreement, in the sense of it's what's going to happen if we disagree, and so having that procedure in place. You can also have in there, what you're agreeing to have in there, and whether or not that's fully enforceable. Well, that, I mean, at the end of the day, think about it, if you're ever actually going to go to court. I know that the US is quite a litigious society, and Australia's becoming more and more like that. But most of the
Yeah.
time, it'd be the 1% of the 1% of matters that actually end up going to court. So I think unless if it's not enforceable, but it helps some understanding between the parties, then it can go in there. But if it's just legalese that is not enforceable because it's for whatever other reason, take it out. It's not necessary, and it just complicates everything going forward.
I've gotten where I kind of break those out into two different parts. Like, one of them is just like I started calling it an MOU, a memorandum of understanding. Like, hey, this isn't legal, but it's just so that we're on the same page and we understand what we're doing together. And then here's the legal piece right here. This is the actual legal
Mm-hmm.
agreement, and kind of breaking those into two
Yep.
different sections because people get nervous about the legal agreement part. The understanding part, we're like, hey, are we just on the same page with things? They're like, oh, yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I agree. We're doing the same thing. But the legals, where they're like, oh, crap, I got to send this to my lawyer and they have to review it. And it's like, oh my God, all we're doing is like a $500 project. This shouldn't take like 2 weeks in attorneys.
Yeah, and Christina, that works so well, and that's and a great analogy to that is like a will. So if you're doing your will, you're talking about what you're going to leave to your family or your friends or whoever when you die. There's lots of things that you have. There's jewelry, there's cars, there's houses, there's paintings, all this stuff that you have. There's a temptation with a will to put all that into the will, right? But then as soon as you sell any of that stuff, then you've got to go back to the lawyer and redraft the will. So you're better off having that outside the will document. And it's the same with an agreement. You're 100% right. Have it in a document that you understand that you don't need to go to a lawyer to change because it's actually just the guardrails of how the business is going to be run. So I think that's a great way of doing it as well. You can either have it in the agreement or have it as a separate document to go forward.
That's smart. I didn't even know you could do that with wills. So I learned something new today. Yay, cool. Something else you mentioned is like you're in Australia and you've been all over the place. And I know, especially here in the US, that lawyers have to be licensed in all of the different states. They have to understand the different
Mm.
state law and federal laws. And like, so lawyers kind of specialize in all these niches, kind of like doctors. I know your business is actually helping people worldwide as well as your personal experience. Like, if somebody's wanting to work with you and you're worldwide, do they need to be concerned about like your ability to speak to local things, or how does that? I don't even know how to ask that question correctly, but I know that's something people are concerned about. So,
Yeah, and it's something that I think is an important thing to get on the table. So we're not the business legal life cycle isn't about providing the actual work, the lawyer work. So it's not we're not providing documentation. We're not giving specific advice to your situation. We're doing the education piece. So we're educating you about why you need to take these legal steps. We're educating you about why these things are important so that we then empower you to go and work with an attorney to do that work. We actually have a referral service as well, Christina, where we can actually refer people to an attorney or lawyer, and we have like networks around the world of lawyers that we've built and that we're building to help us to do that as well. So our product isn't about actually going in there and doing the work. If I was going to do that, it would be I'd need a massive law firm with people all over the world, and I'm just not interested in that. What I'm interested in is that education piece. That when we come back to what we talked about earlier, what people get wrong. It's not understanding what they need to do and why they need to do it. So my books talk about the high level concept. And the funny thing, Christina, is that as someone who's been around the world and talked to lawyers around the world, the law is actually really similar
yeah,
in what it achieves. The book that I wrote in Australia, when I changed it to the UK law, which I went to because it's like the basis of most laws around the world, at least in the Western world, because they colonized half the world, it was only about 20% different in Australia. And a lot of that was just terminology. In the US, it was only about 25% different to the Australia and the UK version. So at a high level of what you need to do in your business from a legal perspective, it's very, very similar. And so I help you to understand what it is that you need to do, why you need to do it. Then that empowers you to go to see your own lawyer, or we can refer you to one so that you can find out more about what you need to do, make sure that you need to do it, and then they go and help you actually do the work that you need to do.
so kind of tying back into one of those very first questions that I was asking about, where it was, how do you like know when to talk to a lawyer? You help them know when to talk to a lawyer. It's
Exactly.
fantastic.
Yes.
Well,
That's exactly what we want to achieve. Yes.
I mean, I know, like, okay, so now we're talking about like the law is kind of the same, around all over the
Mm.
world. So no matter where our listeners are at, like, what are some common mistakes or things that most people just do not understand when it comes to like business and the law?
So we've talked a bit about agreements and actually documenting agreements. One of the phrases that I hear all over the world, and I was in the UK, about a month ago, or maybe 2 months ago now, actually, and I was talking to some business owners over there, and it was the same thing. It's why bother having an agreement because it's not worth the paper it's written on, and that's an agreement with, say, a business partner, or it might be with your clients or customers. It might be with your employees, right? And when you really dive into that statement, which is one of those things that people say, oh, it's not worth the paper it's written on, and then you delve into you ask the question why. people's like kind of stop for a second. And the reason why 99 times out of 100 that I've seen is because they didn't get the right advice about doing the agreement. They just pulled something off the internet or they grabbed something from a friend. It's not worth the paper it's written on if you don't invest the time and money into making sure that it is worth the paper it's written on. Because no two agreements, you referred to Legal Shield before, Christina, and that's a great service. I think it's a great product and it's really helpful. And at the end of the day, most of their agreements you need to customize for yourself. And if you just try and rely upon the agreement that you download off the internet, then it's probably not worth the paper it's written on. Over here in Australia, it's scary how many times people come to us with an agreement that refers to US law because they've downloaded it off the internet or they've found it found it somewhere on the internet, and it scares me because and even in the US you see ones that might be a company based in Delaware that has something they've seen from a Texas law and it refers to that. They haven't thought through the actual implications. So I think the big thing is it's not worth the paper it's written on if you don't invest the time and money in making sure it's right. And that's probably the biggest thing that I see worldwide people getting wrong, because they think, oh, I'll just go and fix that later. You know what? Sometimes that works, and sometimes that's okay. It's the times when it doesn't work that you will wish that you had spent a little bit of money, and I term it investing the money in making sure that it's right. And that comes into employment agreements. So for your team members, it comes into dealing with your customers and clients, and it comes into if you've got a business partner, making sure that you're on the same page.
I know there's so many services out there now, like what Rocket Law and a whole bunch of other ones. Like it's so easy to just go find things now. I mean, even some of the just like document creation services, like I think Adobe's got some templates and stuff, Panda Doc, all those other ones that like let you send agreements. They have so many templates that are like so close. Like most of the time, like cost saving wise, I'll find some of those templates and I'll at least send it over to the lawyers at Legal Shield. I'll be like, hey, can you take a look at this? This is what I'm trying to do. Does it make sense? And, they'll add about 5 pages of legalese to it to make it make sense. And then I'll go streamline it and translate it back down to English. But I mean, there's so many different things, right? I mean, we talked about agreements, which is obviously one with employees, with business partners, with clients. I feel like it's important to do it even on smaller projects. Just, appropriate sized agreements for appropriate sized risk. Like, I'm not going to send someone a 20-page legal document for a $500 project. Like, that doesn't really make
And the reason
sense.
for that, sorry, the reason for that is that whenever two people come to some sort of agreement or some sort of understanding, their understanding of what that means is based on their own experiences, their own interpretations, all that stuff that's in the back of their head. And they might agree to it at that stage, but then a year, 2 years, 3 years down the track, they might have a different interpretation of it. You might have a different interpretation of it. Your goals might have changed. Their goals might have changed. So having it in writing actually and doing it properly stops those disagreements from coming up that end up costing lots of money with fighting with lawyers. So I get it. I get that those services are easy. And as I said, I think they do a great job as a starting point, but I think there's more work that's involved on the back of it. And as I said, I think Legal Shield's a great service because they do provide that help. Sometimes it's not in plain English, but as best you can.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, I think it's good to go over the agreement with your clients too. I mean, I know that's one thing that people have a tendency to do is just to send the proposal and the contract and all that kind of stuff just straight over, especially with all these services like, Panda Doc and stuff like that now that you can use where you can just like poof, poof, and it'll just send it to people and it's ready to sign. I like to sit down and actually go over it. I want them to know what it is they're signing for specifically the reason that you mentioned. Like we get a chance to talk it through and make sure that we're on the same page. Otherwise, people ignore it and just be like, yeah, okay, whatever. This sounds good. Let's just sign. They either ignore it or they send it off to the lawyer for review. One of the two. There kind of almost is no middle ground. Like you'll very rarely get that one client who will actually read it. But most of them, it's one or the other. So I think that's really important to actually make sure you're having that conversation with your client. So I love that you brought that up. I think that's great. What are some other kind of main things that people need to pay attention to when it comes to the law? I mean, I know there's like intellectual property is another big concern. Like, what are some things that you would advise there?
So that was going to be my next one. So we're on the same page there, Christina. So intellectual property, yeah. So really understanding what intellectual property actually means and what you need to do to protect it. Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions out there about what you can actually protect and then how you can actually go and protect it. Like people don't understand, say, copyright, for instance. Say my book, my book, The Business Legal Life Cycle. I have copyright in that book in worldwide, and no one can copy my book. But nothing stops someone from going, I like this concept. I'm going to adjust it. I'm going to put it in my own words and sell it off. You can't protect ideas. You can only protect the expression of the idea. And so, especially with creators, they need to understand that, and that there's not a lot you can do to protect that information, because ideas are really worthless unless you go and take action, and you go and implement it. And so if you've got an idea, there's not really anything you can do to protect it unless it's something that you can get a patent from, or for, and that's really around a novel process or something like that. So I think that that's something that people need to understand what they can actually protect. You can definitely protect from employees stealing clients, or taking intellectual property from your business. You can protect all that as well, but at a general level, ideas are meaningless. It's the implementation of them that matters and how you go about and do that. The other one is trademarks. So every business has a trademark. It's the name of the business or it's their logo. There's a lot of misconceptions out there about actually registering that logo. You don't need to register the logo if you're not going to try and build some big business or anything else. You can have an unregistered trademark if it's just going to be you trading that business. You don't need to go to that expense, because it's not something that you have to do. And it's one of those things that, if you look at a lawyer's checklist of what you need to do when you start up a business, it's register a trademark. And it's like,
Yeah.
yes, that is right legally, right? Don't misunderstand me. From a legal protection as a lawyer, to protect the lawyer, we have to tell you to do that. But from a practical business point of view, it's an expense that you don't need. It's a few $1,000s that especially a startup business operator doesn't need. And the other thing around that, Christina, it's amazing how many times I've seen a business start up with one name. They go and spend the $2,000 or $3,000 to register a trademark, and then they come to me 3 years later and say, "Look, we've decided to change that company name, so we need to register a new trademark," and it's a waste of money. So, what in the life cycle, if people are interested and they check out more about the life cycle, they'll see that that's phase 5, and phase 5 is about protecting your intellectual property, but it's after the first 4 stages, which is the conception is phase 1, startup is phase 2, initial clients is phase 3, and then bringing on employees is phase 4. And the reason the reason it's after all of that is that we want to make sure that you've actually got a viable business before we go to that expense. And we want to make sure that we've got a viable product and everything before we go to that expense. So that's why it's where it is, and it's one of those misconceptions. And as I said, from a strict legal point of view, it's not necessarily what a lawyer will tell you, because they've got they're covering their backside. I'm looking at it from a business point of view as well, and saying why spend the money on it from that perspective.
That makes a lot of sense. I know I've been in business for a little over 15 years and I've changed my business name twice. I probably won't change it again because it's annoying. And I finally picked something that's like, most business owners don't start with a relatively generic business name. They start with something that's like, oh, it's fun and it's cutesy and it's like 4 or 5 words long and has all this packed full of meaning. And, after 2 iterations of that, I was like, I'm not going to do that anymore. I just like picked 2 words that felt meaningful, smashed them together. So it was like spark and initiative. That's how we ended up with
Mm-hmm.
Sparkative. I'm the only
I
one
love
that's ever going to know that or it mean anything, but I have a made up word
it.
and it works.
Yeah,
Everybody
yeah,
misspells it, but that's okay. It's cool. We got it. I know the other intellectual property that I see people protecting a lot is like if they've created systems. Like I have our authority explosion, where we're doing like tons and tons and tons of content for somebody inside of like one, like we do their book and all of their blogs and social posts and email blasts and videos and like all kinds of stuff in 6 months. And so we have that program that is kind of an idea, but like you see people trademarking that kind of stuff all the time. Does that make sense or is that pointless or what do you think?
I think that we're talking about registering a trademark. That's just
Right.
protecting the name and the brand of the business. Yeah, if you've invested all that money in doing it, then then great. You invest all that money when you know that you've got a viable business. So yes, you can go and register it at that point in time, 100%. And if you're going to invest that much money in putting all that stuff together, which I think is awesome, then yes, go and register the trademark at that point in time. But prove it out first and make sure that you're not going to change the name because it's a waste of money otherwise.
That makes a lot of sense. I know people are creating custom programs and stuff all the time nowadays. They're like, masterminds and trademarking all the craziest things. So it's like everybody's
Mm-hmm.
like, you need to go trademark that. I'm like, I don't know what the point is. So look at me getting free legal advice. um, Anyway, if
All good.
somebody else is listening and they don't get to ask you questions to get free legal advice, like I just got to, and they need some help, like where can they go to get some help? Who do you like to kind of work with?
Yeah, thanks, Christina. So the best way is if I've created a landing page as a thank you for having me on the show. So if people are interested to find out more, if they go to businesslegallifecycle.com/ETA for entrepreneurs taking action, just want to make it really easy for people to see, just ETA. They'll be able to go onto the website. They'll see there's a bunch of free resources on that page. And I mentioned before about we help people identify their legal risks. We have our signature product is a assessment that you can take of your business. It takes about 10 minutes. You answer 30 questions, and what it does is it identifies what's missing in your business from a legal perspective. It identifies where you are in the life cycle, so in the 13 phases, and tells you what you need to do for the future, and gives you a checklist of all the things that you need to do, so that you can take that to your lawyer, or we can refer you to one, to go and put that into action for your business. And as a thank you for having me on the show, it's normally $97. We are happy to offer the listeners a 50% discount on that. There's instructions on how to claim that. I was just using a discount code, and they can go and claim that so they can find out more about that. And then if you're interested, there's lots of resources on that website that answer a lot of the questions that people have around their business, and we're constantly putting up new stuff as well. To really, whenever we get asked questions, we look at how can we answer that in an article, because if someone asks us that question, then other people have got that question too. So that would be the easiest way for people to connect with me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for putting that together. That's a really useful resource for people. So great. That's amazing. I'll make sure that link, guys, wherever you're listening to this at out on the web, we put it out all over the place. Wherever you're listening, that link will be somewhere around the video. So definitely check that out and click it. I think that's such a useful resource, especially for such a low price with the discount and everything too. That's kind of one of those no-brainer offers that you need to take advantage
Mm.
of. So thank you so much for coming on today. This has been absolutely amazing.
Thanks so much for having me, Christina. It's been a pleasure.
All right, awesome. Until next time, guys, make sure you head over to etatoday.zone to learn more about how to build a business that enables your lifestyle instead of taking over your life, with lots of great information from other experts just like Jeremy. Bye, guys.